The oak doors of Westminster Abbey crash shut with a sound like thunder. July 19, 1821. Queen Caroline of Brunswick stands frozen on the stone steps, her coronation robes gleaming in the morning Sunday. The scarlet velvet trimmed with man, the diamonds catching light like tears. Behind those massive doors, her husband George Roman IV prepares for his coronation. Without her, the crowd gasps. Whispers ripple through the thousands packed into the streets. A queen barred from her own husband's crowning. Guards in ceremonial uniform block every entrance. Bayonets crossed, faces stone. Caroline pounds on the door. The sound echoes off ancient walls. "I am your queen." Her voice cracks across the square. The guards don't move. Orders from the king himself. Keep her out at all costs. This is power made visible. A woman in full regalia, crowned jewels and royal dignity, reduced to begging at locked doors. The Archbishop of Canterbury continues the ceremony inside as if nothing happens beyond these walls, as if England's queen doesn't stand humiliated before her subjects. Caroline tries another entrance, more guards, more locked doors. The crowd watches their queen turned away like a beggar at a feast. 2 weeks later, Caroline dies. Stomach pains, convulsions, poison, some whisper, though no autopsy ever proves it. What if every Nehemaniac queen in British history shared the same secret? What if their supposed sexual scandals followed an identical pattern repeated across 1,000 years? You're about to discover how accusations of female promiscuity became the deadliest political weapon in the royal arsenal. How whispers in bedchambers toppled thrones. How rumors destroyed dynasties, and how 25 queens paid the ultimate price for threatening male power. Caroline's humiliation at Westminster wasn't unique. She was simply the most recent victim in a systematic campaign of character assassination that stretches back to the Norman conquest. The axe fell at 9:00 a.m. Catherine Howard's scream cut through Tower Green like shattered glass. 19 years old, a teenager who loved dancing and pretty dresses, kneeling on rough wooden boards while 500 spectators pressed against the scaffold rails, the executioner raised the blade high. February 13, 1542. One swift stroke ended a life that began with girlhood games and ended with treason charges. But Catherine Howard wasn't the first Tudor queen to die for supposed adultery. 6 years earlier, Anne Boleyn knelt on this same scaffold. The charges against her read like dark fantasy. Adultery with 5 men, including her own brother, George. The dates made no sense. January 2, 1536. Anne supposedly seduced Markin at Greenwich Palace, except court records place her at Windsor Castle that entire week, 60 miles away. No carriages could cover that distance fast enough for a secret afternoon wrist. The prosecution didn't care about geography. They had confessions. Markin, the young musician, admitted everything after 24 hours in the Tower. The kind of interrogation that leaves permanent marks. 4 other men denied every charge, even under torture. Sir Henry Norris, the king's closest friend. Sir Francis Weston, barely 25. William Brayton, a court official, and George Boleyn, Anne's brother, accused of acts so vile the indictment wouldn't specify them aloud. Anne's trial lasted 4 hours. The verdict was decided before she entered Westminster Hall. 26 peers sat in judgment, her own uncle presiding. Each stood to pronounce guilt. Even her former lover, Henry Percy, though witnesses saw him collapse afterward, carried senseless from the chamber. The evidence consisted of servants reporting closed doors, whispered conversations, a look that lasted too long. One lady-in-waiting claimed Anne and Norris exchanged meaningful glances during a tennis match. Another swore she heard laughter from the Queen's chambers after dark. They executed the 5 men first. Anne watched from her tower window as her brother walked to the scaffold. His final speech survives in the Tower records. He spoke of dying for obeying the king's laws, a cryptic statement that sparked centuries of speculation. The executioner took his head with a single stroke, then Norris, then Weston. Brayton required 2 blows. Smeaton, the only confessor, died last. 5 heads on pikes before Anne's own appointment with the French swordsman Henry had imported specially. Even in execution, she received special treatment. A sword instead of an axe, a skilled executioner instead of the usual headsman. The swordsman struck while Anne prayed. Witnesses said she never stopped speaking, her lips still moving as her head rolled across the scaffold boards. But the truly damning evidence emerged years later, hidden in monastery archives. Brother Martin at Glastonbury Abbey recorded every detail in his chronicle. How Henry Roman VIII met with Cromwell 47 times in the month before Anne's arrest. How the king already planned his marriage to Jane Seymour. How courtiers received their scripts weeks in advance, memorizing testimony about encounters that never happened. The monks wrote it all down, every manufactured detail, every impossible timeline preserved in careful Latin. These weren't neutral observers. These were men who despised Anne Boleyn for breaking England from Rome, for destroying their monasteries, for elevating Protestant ideas. Yet even they recorded the obvious fabrication. Brother Thomas at Canterbury noted the physical impossibility of Anne's supposed crimes while pregnant. The accusations claimed vigorous adultery during her final trimester. When witnesses confirmed she could barely walk, Catherine Howard's story followed the same pattern, just compressed into months instead of years. Married to Henry at 17, dead at 19. Her great crime, having a boyfriend before marriage. Frances Durham, who shared her bed when she lived at her step-grandmother's house. Typical teenage behavior in any century. Love notes passed in secret. Stolen kisses in empty corridors. Meeting after dark when the old Duchess dozed by the fire. The prosecutors called it treason. Premarital activity that tainted the royal bloodline, they argued, even though no pregnancy existed. They tortured Durham for weeks, trying to force admissions of adultery after Catherine's marriage. He held firm, no contact after she became queen. His denials meant nothing. They hanged him, cut him down while still breathing, castrated him, disemboweled him, and burned his entrails before his dying eyes. The full traitor's death for a young man whose crime was loving a girl before she caught a king's attention. Then came Thomas Cowell Pepper, handsome, charming, one of Henry's gentlemen of the bedchamber. Catherine may have loved him, she definitely met him in secret, Lady Rowford arranging their encounters. Love letters survived, though Catherine claimed she wrote under duress, terrified of refusing a man who had the king's ear. The truth hardly mattered. Henry needed grounds for annulment, another barren queen, another political liability, the pattern repeating with mechanical precision. Catherine's final letter to Henry survives in the British archives. Not asking for mercy. She knew better, just requesting the block instead of burning, the traditional punishment for treasonous queens. Henry granted that small mercy. She practiced laying her head on the block the night before, determined to die with dignity. The lieutenant of the Tower found her rehearsing over and over, positioning her neck just right. In the morning, she needed help climbing the scaffold steps. Her legs shook too badly to manage alone. But when she spoke, her voice rang clear. One witness wrote that she confessed to loving Pepper, though official records claimed she died maintaining innocence. The axe fell once, clean, merciful by Tudor standards. They buried her beside Anne Boleyn in the chapel of St. Peter at Vincula. Two queens, one barely past 30, one still in her teens, both executed for crimes that shifted with political convenience, both replaced within weeks by women who understood the new rules. Jane Seymour lasted long enough to produce a son, dying in childbirth before Henry could tire of her. Anne of Cleves accepted annulment without protest, living comfortably as the king's beloved sister. Catherine P. survived by outliving Henry himself, though even she faced heresy charges in his final years. The Tudor queens died, but the weapon that killed them lived on. If fabricated adultery could destroy women at the height of Tudor power, imagine what happened when real passion entered the picture. When queens chose love over crowns, when desire met politics in the glittering courts of later centuries, the moment Isabella of Angulm's French accent echoed through Westminster, the whispers started. 12. A teenage bride arriving from Aquitaine to marry King John, her words rolling with continental rhythms that marked her as foreign before she'd finished her first sentence. The English court ladies exchanged glances. French, young, beautiful, the trinity of suspicion that would follow every foreign queen through British history. Within weeks, the rumors began. Isabella's French ladies spoke too quietly in corners. Her taste for wine exceeded English custom. She laughed too freely at young knights' jokes. The Archbishop of Canterbury himself noted her disturbing continental manners in letters to Rome. What he meant was simple. She didn't bow her head when English nobles expected submission. Caroline of Brunswick faced the same treatment 500 years later. The moment her German accent struck English ears, the campaign began. 1795. Her arrival at Greenwich marked not a royal wedding, but the opening salvo in character assassination. Lord Malmesbury, sent to collect her from Brunswick, started the whispers before her ship left port. His letters to the Prince of Wales dripped with disgust. Her German manners were coarse, her laughter unrestrained, her personal hygiene questionable by English standards. The playbook was so consistent you could predict each move like watching a chess match where only one side knows they're playing. Step 1. Emphasize the accent. Make every word sound like betrayal. Step 2. Question her customs. Foreign habits equal moral corruption. Step 3. Sexualize every difference. French wine became uncontrolled lust. German frankness became sexual availability. Spanish prayers became witchcraft. Henrietta Maria discovered this formula in 1625. French Catholic, 15 years old. The triple threat that transformed a teenage princess into England's greatest danger. Her French accent marked her. Her Catholic faith damned her. Her youth made her vulnerable to accusations no English queen would face. Parliament spent more time debating her French lady's influence than actual matters of state. Every mass she attended sparked rumors of midnight orgies. The rosary in her chambers became evidence of foreign sexual rituals. The mechanics were brilliant in their simplicity. Take any foreign custom and add sex. Henrietta Maria's French dancing became lewd display. Her continental fashion showed too much ankle, too much neck, too much existence. When she brought French cooks to prepare familiar food, pamphlets claimed she fed aphrodisiacs to corrupt English nobility. The fact that she spoke French with her own ladies transformed into evidence of conspiracy. What secrets passed in that foreign tongue? What sexual plots hatched in incomprehensible syllables? Eleanor of Aquitaine had written this script 3 centuries earlier. French lands, French power, French confidence that terrified English barons. 1152. Her marriage to Henry Roman II should have united kingdoms. Instead, it marked her as the eternal outsider, the woman who dared bring continental ideas across the Channel, who refused to abandon her Aquitaine properties, who spoke French in an English court and never apologized for the accent that marked her as other. The accusations against Eleanor followed a template so precise it might have been stamped in metal. Her French court included troubadours, therefore, she encouraged adultery through song. She rode horses like a man. Therefore, she possessed unnatural sexual appetites. She maintained her own properties in Aquitaine. Therefore, she plotted against English interests while conducting affairs with French nobles. Each therefore built on xenophobia disguised as moral concern. But one foreign queen turned their weapon against them. Catherine of Aragon arrived from Spain, understanding the game perfectly. 1501. Her accent marked her as surely as any brand. Spanish princess in English territory. Yet she performed Englishness with theatrical precision, learned the language until no trace of Spanish remained, adopted English dress, English customs, English submission. For 20 years she played the perfect English queen. Then Henry wanted annulment. Suddenly Catherine's Spanish blood poisoned everything. The same qualities praised for decades transformed overnight. Her piety became Spanish religious mania. Her dignity became Aragon's pride. Her refusal to accept annulment became foreign stubbornness corrupting English law. Thomas Cromwell's propaganda machine painted her as the eternal outsider. After 20 years of perfect English behavior, she was Spanish again, foreign again, dangerous again. The pattern repeated with mathematical precision. Anne of Cleves arrived from Germany in 1540. Her crime looking different than her portrait, speaking German, wearing German fashion. Within 6 months, annulled for non-consummation. The official reason hid darker whispers. German women possessed unnatural appetites. Her foreign ladies encouraged continental behavior. Her inability to speak perfect English proved mental deficiency that extended to moral deficiency. The foreign queen trap caught them all, young or old, Catholic or Protestant, beautiful or plain. The accent alone sufficed for condemnation. Isabella of Angulm's French origins haunted her until death. accused of poisoning King John, accused of adultery with French nobles, accused of witchcraft learned in Aquitaine. When she returned to France after John's death, English chroniclers claimed she fled to hide sexual crimes. The woman who arrived as a teenage bride left as a perpetual suspect. The accusation about Isabella's French appetites led directly to her son's throne. Henry Roman III grew up hearing whispers about his mother's foreign blood, how it tainted him, how French corruption ran through royal veins. His marriage to Eleanor of Provence repeated the cycle. Another French queen, another accent marking danger, another round of sexual accusations disguised as protecting English virtue. Catherine de Valois faced the same weapons in 1420. French princess married to Henry V. Her accent immediately marked her a suspect. When Henry died 2 years later, leaving an infant son, Parliament moved swiftly. Laws restricting her movements, regulations governing her household, terror that the French queen might remarry and corrupt the boy king with foreign influence. They couldn't accuse a widow of adultery without evidence, so they prevented her from having any private life that might provide it. Yet Catherine found love anyway. Owen Tudor, a Welsh servant, hardly the foreign corruption Parliament feared. Their secret marriage produced the Tudor line that would rule England, but discovery meant destruction. Parliament declared the marriage invalid. Foreign queens couldn't choose English husbands. Her French blood negated any right to personal happiness. They died before persecution could escalate, but their sons carried the taint. Foreign blood from a grandmother who spoke with an accent. The weapon evolved but never disappeared. By Caroline of Brunswick's time, the technology had refined to perfection. Newspapers replaced pamphlets. Parliamentary hearings replaced tower trials, but the core remained unchanged. Foreign accent equals moral corruption. Different customs equal sexual deviance. The other can never be trusted, especially when the other shares the royal bed. Caroline fought back with unexpected weapons. When they accused her of adultery with her Italian servant Pagani, she demanded public trial. Let England see the evidence. Let them hear witnesses admit they never saw actual impropriety, only closed doors, only foreign laughter, only an accent that marked her as eternal outsider. The House of Lords voted 238 to 123, barely defeating the bill that would have divorced her. Not innocence, just insufficient proof that foreign meant guilty, but the damage was done. When George Roman IV barred her from Westminster Abbey, he wielded centuries of xenophobic tradition. The foreign queen could never belong, could never be trusted, could never be truly English, no matter how many years she lived on English soil. Caroline died 2 weeks after that humiliation, her German origins following her to the grave. Yet the most powerful queen in British history wasn't destroyed by these tactics. She weaponized them. When Elizabeth I faced the same whispers, the same xenophobic strategies, she transformed foreign into strength. Eleanor of Aquitaine divorced one king on Friday and married his worst enemy 9 weeks later, March 21st, 1152. The annulment papers still wet with ink when she rode out of Paris with her Dutch intact. Not stolen in darkness, not smuggled through secret passages. She took half of France in broad daylight because the land belonged to her, not Louis VI, not France, not any man who thought marriage meant ownership. The French court watched their kingdom shrink overnight. Aquitaine stretched from the Loire to the Pyrenees, from the Atlantic to the Massy Central. Vineyards and ports, trade routes and castles. A third of modern France riding away with one woman. Louis advisors begged him to stop her. Send armies, block the roads, do something before the most powerful Dutch in Europe slipped through royal fingers. The land she controlled was larger than the territory of the English crown itself. Louis did nothing. The Pope had spoken, the marriage was void. Eleanor kept what she brought to the altar, 9 weeks. That's all she waited before marrying Henry Plantagenet, the Duke of Normandy, the Count of Anjou, soon to be Henry Roman II of England. Louis's greatest rival gained through marriage what armies couldn't conquer. Eleanor handed him an empire wrapped in wedding vows. The French chroniclers choked on their own ink, trying to describe the betrayal. Their word choice reveals more about medieval male terror than Eleanor's character. Unnatural appetite, insatiable ambition, feminine corruption. They couldn't conceive of a woman choosing her own husband, controlling her own lands, making political decisions with her own mind. The marriage transformed European geography. Henry controlled Normandy and Anjou. Eleanor brought Aquitaine. Together, they held more French territory than the French king. When Henry claimed the English throne 2 years later, he ruled lands from Scotland to Spain. The Angevin Empire, historians call it. Eleanor built it through marriage contracts, not military conquest. She created the greatest European power of the 12th century by divorcing one man and choosing another. Medieval chroniclers painted her as a sexual predator to explain this political genius. William of Newburgh wrote that she cast lustful eyes on Henry while still married to Louis, that she orchestrated the annulment to satisfy uncontrolled desire. Roger of Havant claimed she seduced Henry at the French court when he came to pay homage for Normandy. Javas of Canterbury insisted supernatural lust drove her from one royal bed to another. None of them could accept the obvious truth. Eleanor saw opportunity and seized it. The slander escalated with each decade. Stories of her Amazon army on crusade, leading troops dressed as a warrior goddess, sharing her tent with willing knights while Louis prayed. Gerald of Wales wrote that she slept with Henry's father before taking the sun. That unnatural passion ran in her bloodline, inherited from her grandfather, who wrote love songs to his mistress. Every accusation designed to transform political power into sexual deviance. But Eleanor's real crime was refusing to disappear after providing heirs. Most queens retreated to convents or countryside estates once sons were born. Eleanor governed. She issued charters, held courts, made law, collected taxes, acted like she owned Aquitaine because she did own Aquitaine. This terrified men who believed women existed as breeding stock and nothing more, so they called her the universal solution to female power. Henry understood the threat his wife posed, not sexual betrayal, but political independence. Eleanor maintained her own court at Poitiers, her own treasury, her own diplomatic relationships. When their sons grew old enough to rebel, she sided with them against their father. Not from maternal softness, from calculated assessment that Henry had grown too controlling, that her sons offered better odds for Aquitaine's independence. Henry's solution to his wife problem shocked even medieval standards. He locked her up, 16 years of imprisonment for the crime of political opposition. The prison towers still stand. Chinon SS Barry Winchester, moving her constantly so no rescue could be planned, no single location becoming a rallying point. The Queen of England and Duchess of Aquitaine reduced to one room, and whatever books her jailers permitted, Henry never charged her with adultery. He didn't need sexual accusations when simple confinement worked better. Lock away the body that threatened his power. Let decades of imprisonment do what executioners accomplished faster. But even prison walls couldn't contain Eleanor's influence. Letters smuggled through sympathetic guards, messages coded in psalms and prayers, instructions hidden in the bindings of permitted books. From her prison tower, Eleanor orchestrated the succession that would preserve her legacy. Richard the Lionheart grew up knowing his mother was caged for defying tyranny. When Henry died in 1189, Richard's first act as king was freeing Eleanor. She emerged from 16 years of captivity at 67. Most women her age prepared for death. Eleanor ruled. She governed England while Richard crusaded, negotiated his ransom when enemies captured him, arranged strategic marriages for her grandchildren, defended Anjou against French armies at age 77, led troops herself when castle walls needed defending. The chroniclers still called her unnatural. What else could explain a woman refusing to die quietly? The sexual slander followed her to the grave and beyond. Historians repeated medieval lies as facts for centuries. The lustful queen who couldn't control her appetites, who destroyed the Second Crusade with her adultery, who seduced father and son from pure corruption. Only when scholars examined actual documents, rather than chroniclers' fantasies, did Eleanor's truth emerge. Land deeds, legal charters, tax records, administrative documents that revealed a brilliant political mind, not an insatiable sexual appetite. Her imprisonment created the template for controlling dangerous queens. When you can't execute them for treason, lock them away. When prison bars aren't enough, add madness to the mix. Call them hysterical, unbalanced, corrupted by female hormones that destroy rational thought. Eleanor survived her imprisonment, But the next warrior queen wouldn't be so fortunate when mental illness entered the equation. Paint female power as insanity, and watch how quickly the world agrees to lock it away. The clash of steel against stone echoes through the corridors of Windsor Castle. December 1453. Margaret of Anjou finds her husband, King Henry VI, collapsed in his chambers, eyes open, but seeing nothing. The physicians whisper catonia. The nobles whisper worse. England's king lies frozen while the Wars of the Roses rage outside castle walls. Margaret faces a choice that will damn her forever. Let England burn while her husband stares at nothing, or pick up the sword he can no longer hold. She chooses the sword. Within days, she's issuing orders in the king's name, commanding armies, moving troops, making decisions that keep the kingdom from collapse. The nobles react with predictable horror. A woman commanding men, a queen wielding power meant for kings. The whispers start before Henry's physicians finish their first examination. She must have poisoned him. Witchcraft from her French homeland. Sexual corruption that drove the king to madness. Anything except the obvious truth. England needs leadership, and Margaret provides it. But competence in a queen translates to promiscuity in the medieval mind. The better Margaret rules, the louder the sexual accusations grow. When she wins battles, chroniclers claim she seduces generals. When she negotiates treaties, they insist she beds ambassadors. When she holds court, every smile becomes evidence of uncontrolled lust. The equation is simple. Female power equals female corruption, always without exception. The propaganda machine cranks into motion. Yorkist writers paint Margaret as the she-wolf of France, not a lioness protecting her cubs, a wolf, foreign, predatory, unnatural. They describe her riding into battle like a man, wearing armor that reveals her rejection of feminine submission, speaking to soldiers with authority. No proper woman would claim. Each military success becomes proof of sexual deviance. The Battle of St. Albans proves their point. February 17, 1461. Margaret leads 18,000 men against Yorkist forces, not from a safe distance. She rides with the vanguard, issues orders from horseback, watches arrows fall like rain while planning cavalry charges. Her army wins, crushes the Yorkists, recaptures her husband who'd been their prisoner for months. Victory brings acceleration of slander. How else could a woman defeat men in battle? She must have promised sexual favors to her commanders, shared her bed with common soldiers, used feminine WS where masculine strategy should prevail. The chroniclers describe her victory feast in terms that belong in brothel, not royal halls. Every celebrating soldier becomes her lover. Every strategic alliance becomes adultery. The propaganda reaches its peak with attacks on her son, Prince Edward of Westminster, born during one of Henry's lucid periods. The Yorkists spread rumors that Henry's madness made conception impossible, that Margaret sought fertile men to secure succession. Edmund Boward, James Butler, any lord who showed her loyalty became the real father in Yorkist pamphlets. Never mind that Henry recovered for months around Edward's conception. Facts matter less than the weapon they provide. Margaret fights back the only way she knows. More battles, more victories, each success bringing worse accusations. When she raises armies in Scotland, she's selling English honor for Scottish beds. When French troops support her cause, she's trading sexual favors for foreign swords. When Welsh lords join her banner, she's corrupting ancient bloodlines with feminine pollution. The accusations multiply faster than she can win battles to disprove them. The mechanism is brilliant in its cruelty. Force a woman into masculine roles through circumstance. Attack her for filling those roles competently. Use her competence as proof of sexual corruption. Create a trap where success and failure both lead to the same accusation. Margaret can't win because the game itself is rigged against her. Tewkesbury changes everything. May 4, 1471. The final battle that destroys Margaret's cause. Prince Edward falls in the fighting, her 17-year-old son cut down while his mother watches from the battlefield. Some say he died fighting. Others claim execution after capture. The details matter less than the result. Margaret's reason for fighting dies in Gloucestershire mud. The Yorkists capture Margaret herself. No dramatic last stand. No warrior queen fighting to the death. Just a broken mother cradling her son's body while enemies close in. They don't execute her. Death would make her a martyr. Instead, they parade her through London streets, display the she-wolf in chains, show England what happens to women who dare command armies. The sexual slander continues even in defeat. Yorkist chronicles describe her imprisonment in the Tower as fitting punishment for unnatural lusts. They claim she tried seducing her guards, offered her body for freedom, corrupted young men with French wilds. Every kindness shown by sympathetic jailers becomes evidence of her persistent sexual power. Even broken and chained, she remains dangerous in their telling. Margaret survives through Louis XI's intervention. Her French cousin ransoms her after 4 years of captivity. She returns to France, stripped of everything. No son, no husband, no kingdom, no reputation beyond the she-wolf label that followed her across the Channel. The woman who held England together during her husband's madness dies in poverty, remembered only as a monster. Her true crime was competence. Every successful battle proved women could lead armies. Every strategic victory demonstrated female tactical brilliance. Every moment she governed effectively threatened the foundation of male supremacy. So they called her the same weapon deployed against Eleanor of Aquitaine, the same accusations leveled at Isabella, the same slander that would destroy queens for centuries to come. But Margaret's story held special lessons for future queens. Foreign birth amplified every accusation. French blood explained her unnatural behavior. Her accent marked her as eternally other. When she spoke commands in French-accented English, every word reinforced her alien status. She could win 100 battles and still be the foreign she-wolf corrupting English virtue. The chroniclers preserved every sexual slander while ignoring her actual achievements. Military innovations that changed medieval warfare. Diplomatic alliances that nearly saved the Lancastrian cause. Administrative competence that kept government functioning during royal madness. All erased beneath propaganda about her supposed lovers. History remembers the she-wolf, not the woman who refused to let England collapse. Her death in 1482 passed almost unnoticed in England, a footnote in French chronicles about an exiled queen dying in poverty. No English writer bothered recording her final words or thoughts. The she-wolf was already dead in their histories, reduced to cautionary tale about female ambition. Future queens would study her example and learn the price of visible competence. Margaret of Anjou died in exile, branded forever as the she-wolf who corrupted English virtue with French blood and feminine power. But 200 years later, another foreign princess would face the same weapon with deadlier results. Marie Antoinette would discover that accusations of sexual excess could topple more than reputations. They could bring down kingdoms and send queens to the scaffold. George Roman IV hired spies to watch his wife's bedroom, but what they reported back made him the laughingstock of Europe. 1818. The Milan Commission arrives in Italy with unlimited funds and one mission: find evidence that Caroline of Brunswick commits adultery with her Italian servant Bartolomeo Pergami. 6 English lawyers, 20 Italian informants, hundreds of bribes paid to servants, innkeepers, anyone who might have glimpsed the Princess of Wales in compromising positions. The Commission's secret reports survive in the royal archives. Page after page of surveillance, notes that read like comedy rather than criminal evidence. Caroline sleeps in a tent while traveling. Scandal. She sits beside Pagami at dinner. Outrage. She promotes him from courier to chamberlain. Proof of sexual corruption. The spies document every smile, every gesture, every moment that might suggest impropriety. They never witness actual adultery. August 3rd, Commissioner Powell writes to London describing Caroline's villa on Lake Co. She swims in the lake wearing a loose gown. The fabric clings when wet. Pagami stands guard on shore. This becomes evidence of exhibitionist sexuality in official reports. Never mind that Italian heat makes swimming normal, that modest women across Europe bathe in lakes wearing similar garments. In English eyes, water plus foreign country equals sexual deviance. The mathematics of destruction were simple. Caroline fled England in 1008, 114 after George made her life unbearable. He took mistresses openly. She couldn't breathe without scrutiny. Her choice was exile or madness. She chose exile, traveled through Europe seeking the peace England denied her. But George needed more than separation. He needed annulment. That required proof of adultery. so he hired the commission to manufacture what reality wouldn't provide. September 15th. Commissioner Brown interviews dismissed servant Louise Diant. She swears she saw Caroline and Pergamy in bed together once through a keyhole in darkness. She can't specify the date, can't describe what she actually witnessed, but she needs money, and the commission pays well for testimony. Her statement joins dozens of similar accounts. Servants who saw closed doors, heard laughter, noticed familiar conversation, each paid handsomely for transforming nothing into something. The witnesses contradict each other hilariously. J.P. Satch claims Caroline and Pergamy shared a cabin on her yacht. Gaetano Paterzo swears they had separate quarters. Both men collected payment for their testimony. Neither could explain why their stories failed to align. The commission didn't care. Volume mattered more than consistency. Stack enough accusations, and surely something would stick. Caroline knew about the spies, hard-to-miss English gentlemen following her across Italy, interviewing every person she encountered. She responded with theatrical defiance. If they wanted scandal, she'd give them spectacle. She attended masquerade balls dressed as a peasant, danced with local farmers, let Pergamy escort her publicly. Each provocation calculated to expose the absurdity of George's persecution. The commission's most damaging evidence came from a purchase diary. Theodore Maggi, another dismissed servant, produced written records of Caroline's supposed crimes, dates when she touched Pergamy's hand, time she laughed at his jokes, moments of human warmth between employer and employee. The diary's ink looked suspiciously fresh. The handwriting changed between entries, but fresh forgery paid better than stale truth. November 1820, the commission returns to England with crates of testimony. George demands immediate action. Parliament must try Caroline for adultery, strip her of the title Queen, grant him the divorce he's wanted since their wedding night 25 years ago. But Caroline shocks everyone. Instead of cowering in exile, she returns to England, demands her rights as queen, forces the trial George thought would happen in her absence. The House of Lords becomes a courtroom. August 17, 1820. Peers in ermine robes sit in judgment while England watches. The prosecution presents the Milan Commission's evidence. Maggi takes the stand. Under cross-examination, his testimony collapses. Non, my ricordo. I don't remember. He repeats it so often it becomes a catchphrase. London street singers mock him in Italian. Children chant non, my record order in playgrounds. Caroline's lawyer, Henry Brougham, destroys each witness methodically. Louise Diant admits she was dismissed for theft before providing testimony. J.P. Satch confesses to receiving $800 for his statement. Witness after witness reveals payment for testimony. The Lords shift uncomfortably. This isn't evidence of adultery. It's evidence of George's desperation to destroy his wife. The English public turns decisively pro-Caroline, not from love, but from recognition. Every woman trapped in miserable marriage sees herself in the Queen. Every person bullied by power identifies with her persecution. Crowds gather outside Parliament chanting support. God Save Queen Caroline echoes through London streets. George becomes the villain in his own prosecution, but the establishment closes ranks. The Lords vote 238 to 123 against the divorce bill. Not acquittal, just insufficient majority to proceed. Caroline wins legally but loses everything else. George still refuses recognition, still bars her from court, still denies her coronation rights. She's queen in name, but prisoner in practice. Then comes July 19, 1821. George schedules his coronation. Caroline arrives at Westminster Abbey in full regalia. The doors slam shut. Guards block every entrance. England watches their queen turned away like unwanted guest at her own husband's crowning. The ultimate humiliation broadcast to the nation. Caroline pounds on the doors. I am your queen. The guards don't move. The ceremony proceeds without her. 2 weeks later, Caroline falls violently ill during a theater performance. Stomach cramps, vomiting, convulsions that wreck her body. She tells attendants she's been poisoned. The physicians dismiss female hysteria. August 7, 1821. Caroline dies in agony, no autopsy, quick burial. Case closed on the queen who dared demand dignity. The Milan Commission's records reveal the weapon's evolution. Medieval queens faced execution for manufactured adultery. Caroline faced character assassination through purchase testimony, same goal, different method, destroy the woman who won't disappear quietly. But Caroline's death looked like defeat when actually she'd won something crucial. She forced England to witness the machinery of destruction, made the weapon visible. The commission spent 35,000 hunting adultery that didn't exist. They interviewed hundreds of witnesses, filled thousands of pages with testimony about nothing. The sheer excess exposed the persecution. When Majaki stammered non misericordo for the 50th time, when bribed servants contradicted each other openly, when the evidence amounted to closed doors and foreign laughter, England saw the truth. The sexual accusations were never about morality. They were about control. Caroline's death ended one chapter, but the pattern lived on. Foreign accent plus female power still equaled sexual deviant in the English mind. The weapon that destroyed Caroline would find new targets, new queens who thought marriage meant partnership instead of submission. But one Tudor queen had already proven that owning your sexuality could mean survival. She turned the weapon against itself, made promiscuity into power, and ruled for 45 years while her accusers died forgotten. Robert Dudley's footsteps echo on the private staircase at midnight, September 3rd, 1560. The same route he's taken for months, maybe years, leading to Elizabeth Tudor's bedchamber. Guards pretend not to notice. They've perfected the art of selective blindness when Lord Robert visits their queen after dark. The carved oak door opens before he knocks. Elizabeth expects him, the virgin queen who swore she'd live and die unmarried, the woman who told Parliament she wedded England itself. Yet here stands Dudley, her master of horse, disappearing into royal chambers while London sleeps. Tomorrow foreign ambassadors will write detailed reports about sounds from behind closed doors, laughter that lasts too long, silences that suggest more than conversation. The Spanish ambassador, Count de Fia, fills pages with speculation about what happens when England's virgin queen entertains her favorite until dawn. Elizabeth understands the game perfectly. Let them wonder. Let them gossip. Let uncertainty become her greatest weapon. Neither confirming nor denying transforms rumor into power. Every whispered scandal strengthens her position because nobody knows the truth. Virgin or lover, sacred or profane, the mystery matters more than any answer. Amy Robart Dudley dies at 8 in the morning, September 8th, 1560. Her body lies twisted at the foot of Commonplace Stairs, neck snapped clean. The coroner's report describes massive head trauma, consistent with falling down stone steps, or being pushed or being thrown. The servants were mysteriously absent, sent to Abington Fair by Amy herself. A house empty, except for one woman who supposedly chose that particular Sunday to accidentally break her neck. The timing couldn't be worse or better, depending on perspective. Elizabeth and Dudley's midnight meetings had grown bold enough that marriage rumors reached fever pitch. Amy Dudley stood as the only barrier between Lord Robert and a crown. Now she lies dead under circumstances that scream murder to anyone with functioning ears. William Cecil, Elizabeth's chief advisor, writes frantically that the Queen must distance herself immediately. A 28-year-old woman doesn't accidentally die the exact moment her husband needs freedom to marry England's Queen. Elizabeth banishes Dudley from court not from moral outrage but political calculation. She orders thorough investigation, knowing what everyone will assume regardless of findings. The coroner's jury returns a verdict of death by misadventure. Nobody believes it. Diplomatic pouches overflow with reports about the convenient accident. The Holy Roman Emperor's ambassador writes that Dudley murdered his wife to clear his path to the throne. The Scottish envoy reports widespread conviction that Elizabeth ordered the killing herself. Dudley stays banished for months, while Elizabeth performs public grief for poor Amy. She wears mourning colors, speaks sadly of the tragedy, all while calculating exactly how long respectability requires before Lord Robert can return. The Virgin Queen mourning arrival she never acknowledged. The performance deserves applause for sheer audacity. When Parliament demands she marry, Elizabeth delivers speeches about her sacred virginity. October 10, 1566. Lords and Commons united in begging their queen to take a husband, produce heirs. Secure succession. Elizabeth stands before them draped in cloth of gold, diamonds glittering like tears, and explains she'd rather die childless than compromise her bond with England. I have already joined myself in marriage to a husband, namely the Kingdom of England. The words ring through Westminster Hall while everyone knows Dudley waits in nearby chambers. The genius lies in performative contradiction. Proclaim virginity while maintaining visible favorite. Swear celibacy while allowing constant speculation. Create narrative tension that keeps enemies off balance. If she's truly virgin, why does Dudley visit nightly? If she's secretly lovers with Dudley, why not marry when Amy's death provides opportunity? The questions multiply without resolution. Foreign ambassadors report intimate scenes that paint conflicting pictures. The French envoy describes finding Elizabeth and Dudley in her privy chamber, her hand on his face, speaking too quietly for witnesses to hear. The Venetian ambassador recounts Elizabeth visiting Dudley's bedchamber during his illness, sitting beside him for hours, feeding him broth with her own hands. The Spanish spy network reports servants finding them alone in palace gardens, his arm around her waist, her head against his shoulder. Each report builds the mythology without confirming facts. Elizabeth carefully stages moments of intimacy where ambassadors might observe, then delivers speeches about eternal virginity with equal conviction. The whiplash keeps everyone guessing. Catholic Europe needs to know if she'll marry and produce Protestant heirs. Protestant England fears she'll accept a Catholic prince for alliance. Elizabeth feeds both anxieties while committing to neither. Christopher Hatton joins the dance in 1064. Young, handsome, accomplished dancer who catches the Queen's eye during Christmas revels. Suddenly, Dudley has competition. Elizabeth showers Hatton with gifts, appointments, intimate attention that sets court tongues wagging. Does she take multiple lovers? Has she replaced Dudley? Or does she orchestrate jealousy to maintain control over powerful men? The pattern repeats with calculated precision. Walter Raleigh appears in 1581. Another handsome favorite earning royal attention that suggests but never confirms physical intimacy. Then the Earl of Essex in 1587, young enough to be her son, but treated with affection that sparks fresh rounds of speculation. Each favorite serves the same purpose: maintain the tension between virgin and woman, keep the question perpetually unanswered. Elizabeth transforms the traditional weapon against queens into her shield. Previous queens died when accused of promiscuity. She makes promiscuity impossible to prove or disprove. The speculation becomes the point. The mystery generates power that certainty would destroy. If she definitively claimed virginity, enemies would work to disprove it. If she admitted lovers, she'd face the same destruction as her mother. Instead, she occupies the space between categories. The propaganda machine that destroyed previous queens can't find purchase on ambiguity. How do you slander someone who refuses clear definition? Every accusation meets strategic uncertainty. Foreign courts fill hundreds of pages speculating about her virginity. Decades of surveillance produce no definitive evidence. Either way, the Spanish collect servant testimony about bloody bed sheets that might indicate monthly cycles or might mean nothing. The French document hand-holding that might signal affection or political theater. Elizabeth dies on March 24, 603, 69 years old, 45-year reign. Still proclaimed the Virgin Queen despite decades of speculation. She controlled her narrative from first day to last breath, turned sexual rumor from weapon into armor, made mystery more powerful than any truth. Her body, dressed in white satin, carries secrets to the grave that historians still debate 4 centuries later. Modern medical examination of surviving documents suggests probable virginity. Descriptions of physical symptoms align with intact hymen causing painful menstruation, but medical evidence matters less than the performance. Elizabeth proved that controlling your own sexual narrative meant survival, that strategic ambiguity could outlast concrete accusation, that a woman could rule for nearly half a century, while Europe debated what happened in her bedchamber after midnight. The lords who demanded she marry died waiting for answer. The ambassadors who spied on her intimate moments never solved the puzzle. Dudley himself went to his grave uncertain if he was lover or prop in elaborate theater. Elizabeth kept her secret and her throne, the virgin who might not be, the woman who might not exist, the queen who transformed sexual speculation into source of strength. She constructed identity that couldn't be destroyed because it couldn't be defined. Neither virgin nor but something occupying the space between, a third category that previous queens couldn't imagine. Eleanor of Aquitaine had to choose between wife and prisoner, Margaret of Anjou between mother and monster. Elizabeth created new possibility, the virgin queen who entertained men until dawn, the celibate woman who inspired jealous competition among favorites, the eternal mystery that weaponized uncertainty against those who would use certainty to destroy her. Elizabeth controlled her narrative for 45 years, but in the 20th century, scandal would finally catch a royal on camera. The technology changed, photography replaced oil portraits, newspapers replaced handwritten dispatches. Privacy itself became extinct when Princess Margaret discovered that even a princess couldn't hide from telephoto lenses. October 23, 1955. Princess Margaret's voice cuts through static on BBC Radio. Each word measured like medicine drops. I would like it to be known that I have decided not to marry Group Captain Peter Townsend. The transmission reaches 20 million listeners. Teacups pause midway to lips across Britain. A princess choosing duty over love, live on national airwaves. 2 years earlier, the flashbulbs first caught them together at Westminster Abbey. Elizabeth's coronation day, June 2, 1953. Margaret reaches up to brush lint from Townsend's uniform. A gesture lasting 3 seconds. Photographers capture every frame, the intimacy in her fingertips, the way he leans toward her touch. Front pages the next morning scream what palace protocols forbid discussing. The king's daughter loves a divorced man. The Archbishop of Canterbury summons Margaret within days. Cosmo Lang sits behind his massive oak desk, fingers steepled like an executioner preparing his blade. The Church's position remains absolute. The Royal Marriages Act, the law written in 1772 specifically to prevent royals from making inconvenient choices. Margaret needs the Queen's permission to marry before age 25. After that, she needs Parliament's consent. Neither will come for a divorced man whose former wife still breathes. Townsend's RAF record reads like propaganda. Battle of Britain hero shot down 11 enemy aircraft. Earned the Distinguished Service Order and Bar. The man who helped save England from Nazi invasion now faces destruction from palace courtiers. His crime exists in divorce papers filed 5 years before Margaret glanced his way. Rosemary Tounce, and left him for another man, the innocent party in adultery proceedings. Yet that legal innocence means nothing when royal blood enters the equation. The establishment mobilizes with military precision. Churchill himself weighs in from Downing Street. The Commonwealth must be considered. Canada's Prime Minister cables objections. Australia threatens constitutional crisis. New Zealand questions allegiance. The entire empire apparently hangs on whether one princess can marry the man she loves. Margaret discovers her heart has become a matter of state security. The surveillance begins immediately. Palace staff report every glance between Margaret and Townsend. Security details log each conversation. Lasting longer than protocol demands, servants find excuses to enter rooms where they might be alone. The machinery that once hunted Anne Boleyn's supposed lovers adapts to modern technology. Now they use telephone taps instead of torture chambers. Exile comes dressed as promotion. The Air Ministry suddenly requires Townsend's expertise in Brussels. Urgent posting matter of national importance. He leaves London within the month. Margaret watches from palace windows as his car disappears through the gates. 2 years minimum, the Queen's advisors' counsel. Let time cool passion. Let distance destroy what proximity nurtured. Let the princess remember her duty. The separation torture works both ways. Belgian newspapers photograph Towns end at diplomatic functions, always alone. British press tracks Margaret through official engagements, documenting every forced smile. The mechanism grinding them apart operates in full public view. No secret dungeons needed when bureaucracy accomplishes the same result. Margaret rebels in small ways, refuses suitable suitors paraded before her. Lord Dalkeith, Johnny Althorpe, Billy Wallace, each young aristocrat perfectly bred for royal marriage, each rejected with barely concealed contempt. She attends parties that end at dawn, smokes cigarettes in public, wears dresses that show more skin than dowagers approve. If they want a scandal, she'll give them theater. October 21, 1955, Townshend returns to London for consultations. The press camps outside his flat. Photographers perch in trees. Reporters bribe chambermaids. The reunion everyone awaits finally happens at Clarence House. 90 minutes behind closed doors while Britain holds its breath. They emerge separately. No statements, no smiles, no indication whether love survived 2 years of forced separation. The ultimatum arrives that evening. Margaret can marry Townshend if she renounces her rights of succession, forfeits her civilist income, lives as a private citizen without royal privileges. The price tag attached to love spelled out in bureaucratic detail. Choose the man and lose everything else. Keep the titles and abandon happiness. Binary choices designed to ensure only one outcome. Tommy Lascelles, the Queen's private secretary, delivers the final blow. Even renunciation might not suffice. The government could still refuse permission. Parliament might debate her morality in public session. The Church would certainly condemn. She'd become the woman who chose divorce over duty, the princess who valued personal happiness above national stability. History would remember her as they remembered Wallis Simpson, the American divorce who stole a king and nearly destroyed the monarchy. Margaret spends the weekend at Windsor considering her options. Saturday morning, she walks the long gallery where Henry Roman VIII's portraits hang, dead wives watching from gilded frames. Sunday, she attends chapel where prayers include pointed passages about sacrifice and obligation. Monday, she returns to London with her decision made. The statement she reads on radio was drafted by palace lawyers, each word vetted for constitutional implications. Mindful of the Church's teaching that Christian marriage is indissoluble and conscious of my duty to the Commonwealth. The legalese masks are heartbreaking in real time. 15 million television viewers watch her subsequent appearances, looking for cracks in the performance, finding only perfect royal composure. Townshend leaves England permanently 3 days later. He writes an autobiography that carefully avoids revealing intimate details, marries a Belgian woman who looks nothing like Margaret, has children who grow up calling someone else mother, lives the life he might have shared in parallel universe where divorce papers didn't exist. Margaret's revenge arrives in increments. She marries Anthony Armstrong Jones in 1960. A photographer, decidedly not aristocracy, divorced parents, bohemian friends, everything the establishment despises wrapped in a wedding that costs thousands. The marriage explodes in spectacular fashion. Affairs on both sides, vicious public arguments, divorce proceedings that splash across tabloids for months. The irony tastes bitter in retrospect. She sacrificed towns and to avoid scandal and created worse devastation. Stayed royal to preserve dignity and lost it through sanctioned marriage, chose duty over love and ended up with neither. The very people who demanded she abandon towns and later granted her permission to become the first royal divorce since Henry Roman VIII. But Margaret's sacrifice carved the path for others to follow. When Prince Charles loved Camilla Parker B.S., a divorce, the palace separated them just as efficiently. History repeating with mechanical precision. Yet when Diana arrived, young and virginal and suitable, that marriage also collapsed in spectacular fashion. The weapon that worked on Margaret failed against Diana's media savvy. Diana understood what Margaret couldn't. That public opinion had shifted, that television cameras could be weapons too, that a princess crying on panorama reached more hearts than centuries of protocol. When Diana said there were 3 of us in this marriage, she exposed the machinery Margaret had protected through silence. Margaret died in 2002, her love story reduced to historical footnote. Townshend had passed 5 years earlier in France. They never met again after that October weekend. The sacrifice she made to preserve the monarchy's dignity became meaningless when her nephew's marriage exploded across global headlines. When paparazzi chased Diana through Paris tunnels, when royal secrets spilled across newspapers like blood, the archbishop who forbade Margaret's happiness lived to see divorce become commonplace. The courtiers who engineered Townshend's exile watched their successors fail to contain Diana's revelations. The system that crushed Margaret's love crumbled when faced with a woman who refused to stay silent. October 23, 1955, a princess speaks into a microphone, each word a nail in her own coffin. She chooses the crown over happiness, never knowing her sacrifice would prove meaningless, that the niece-in-law she'd never meet would burn down every protocol Margaret died protecting. November 25, 1995. The BBC sends Martin Basher to meet Diana at Kensington Palace. She knows exactly what weapon she's about to forge. 23 million viewers will watch her detonate 34 years of silence. The Princess of Wales sits in her drawing room, cameras rolling, and speaks words that palace walls were built to contain. There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. The sentence lands like a precision strike. Charles and Camilla exposed in 11 words, no euphemisms, no royal discretion, just truth delivered straight to the nation's living rooms. Diana understands something Margaret never grasped. The establishment's power depends on secrets. Speak them aloud and watch the foundation crack. The interview preparations took months of secret meetings. Bashir convinced Diana using forged documents, bank statements suggesting palace staff sold stories, letters implying systematic surveillance. Diana already suspected betrayal. The forgeries simply confirmed her paranoia. She agreed to the interview believing enemies surrounded her. The tragic irony cuts deep. She was right about the surveillance, wrong about who orchestrated it. Diana wears her black suit-like armor, the cold-rimmed eyes that launched 1000 magazine, covers now telegraph exhaustion, but her voice never wavers. She discusses bulimia with clinical precision. Self-harm revealed a symptom of royal captivity. Adultery admitted without shame. Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him. James Hewitt's name spoken aloud while palace lawyers scramble for injunctions that come too late. The panorama bomb explodes through calculated confession. Diana admits her own affairs before anyone can weaponize them against her. Takes control of the narrative that destroyed Caroline of Brunswick, that exiled Catherine Howard, that imprisoned Eleanor of Aquitaine. She speaks her sins into camera and dares England to judge. The machinery designed to crush wayward queen stutters when the target aims the weapon at herself. But revenge cuts both directions. Diana knows this appearance signs her death warrant. Not literally, not yet. The palace operates through bureaucracy, not assassination. Yet she recognizes the price of breaking ranks. The royal family communicates through silence, through coded statements, through traditions stretching back centuries. Diana just set those traditions ablaze on national television. There will be consequences. December 20th, 1995. The Queen's letter arrives at Kensington Palace. 5 words that change everything. An early divorce is desirable. Elizabeth Roman, too, rarely commits opinions to paper. This exception carries the weight of execution orders. Diana reads her eviction notice from the monarchy. The establishment's response to her nuclear option arrives wrapped in perfect penmanship. The divorce negotiations reveal the true battlefield, not custody arrangements or financial settlements. Those details matter less than the symbolic amputation. Diana loses her Royal Highness. The title that protected her for 15 years vanishes with lawyer signatures. She keeps the jewels, the apartments, the bodyguards, but loses the armor that mattered most. Without HR, she becomes vulnerable. A private citizen who knows state secrets. A loose cannon loaded with dangerous information. Diana tests her new freedom immediately. Landmine campaigns in Angola. Hospital visits without palace approval. Dating choices that send courtiers reaching for smelling salts. Dodi fired represents everything the establishment despises. Egyptian Muslim, arms dealer's son. Diana displays him like a battle flag. Look who the mother of your future king chooses. Watch her flaunt conventions you hold sacred. Each paparazzi photo delivers another blow to royal dignity. The surveillance intensifies beyond anything Caroline of Brunswick endured. Not Italian spies bribing servants. Modern technology tracks Diana's every movement. Mobile phones monitored. Security cameras mapped. The Ritz Hotel's route to Dodd's apartment. Documented by photographers who know exactly where to position themselves. August 31st, 1997. The black Mercedes enters the Pont d'Ilma tunnel at 65 mph. What happens in those final seconds depends on which report you believe. French investigators cite drunk driving. British intelligence notes the convenient absence of tunnel cameras. Witnesses describe a white Fiat that vanishes without explanation, the bright flash that might be paparazzi strobe or something more deliberate. Henry pulls blood alcohol levels that don't match his behavior on security footage. Diana conscious after impact, speaking final words that conflict across witness accounts. The aftermath reveals the weapon turned against itself. Diana's death creates the very scandal she embodied. 1,000,000 flowers at palace gates. Crowds demanding the Queen acknowledge their grief. Elizabeth forced from Balmoral to London, compelled to speak on television, to bow before Diana's coffin. The princess who broke protocol in life commands submission in death. The establishment that silenced her must now speak her name with reverence. Tony Blair calls her the people's princess. The phrase sticks because it captures what the palace never understood. Diana didn't just confess her secrets. She democratized them, made her eating disorder relatable to millions, her marital pain familiar to every woman trapped in loveless union, her struggle against institutional power recognizable to anyone facing bureaucratic cruelty. Margaret kept quiet and died forgotten. Diana spoke out and became immortal. The conspiracy theories multiply because the pattern fits too perfectly. A troublesome princess, sexual scandals exposed, exile imposed. Then convenient death before more secrets spill. Caroline of Brunswick poisoned 2 weeks after Westminster humiliation. Diana crushed in a tunnel while dating establishment's nightmare. The parallels scream louder than evidence whispers. Maybe she simply died in a car crash. Maybe water is simply wet. But the timing remains exquisite in its cruelty. September 6, 1997. Westminster Abbey fills with the same nobility who shunned Diana living. They sing hymns while her sons walk behind her coffin. William and Harry, 15 and 12, displaying royal composure while their world burns. The cameras catch Prince Philip's hand on Harry's shoulder, a gesture of comfort or control. The boys, trained from birth to hide emotion, perform perfectly. Their mother's greatest rebellion was feeling in public. Their survival depends on forgetting her lessons. Earl Spencer's eulogy lands like artillery fire in the Abbey. He promises to protect Diana's sons from the royal machinery that consumed their mother. Applause erupts outside and rolls through ancient doors, the sound of common people invading sacred space. The Queen sits frozen while her subjects violate protocol. Diana's revolution continues past death. The confession that began on panorama echoes through stone arches built to ensure silence. But the boys grow up inside palace walls. William learns to smile for cameras while trusting no one behind them. Harry rebels until rebellion nearly destroys him. Both discover their mother's strategy only works once. You can detonate 1 nuclear confession per generation. After that, the public grows bored. The palace adapts. New protocols emerge to prevent future Diana, media training, psychological support, modern wives who understand their boundaries. 20 years pass. November 27, 2017. Prince Harry announces engagement to Meghan Markle. American divorced biracial. The establishment prepares for Diana Redux, but technology evolved faster than palace protocols. Social media amplifies every whisper. Trolls weaponize hatred at digital speed. The machinery that killed Diana looks quaint compared to modern destruction. Meghan discovers that confession means nothing when lies travel faster than truth. The pattern holds but mutates. Foreign woman enters royal family. Accusations of impropriety begin immediately, except now they trend on Twitter instead of circulating in handwritten letters. Palace sources brief against her through WhatsApp instead of carrier pigeon. The exile comes through bureaucratic suffocation rather than locked doors. Harry watches his wife face the same weapon that destroyed his mother. This time he chooses her over crown. Diana's nuclear option changed the game, but didn't end it. She proved queens could speak forbidden truths and survive the speaking, at least temporarily. At least until Paris tunnels swallow secrets whole. Her confession strategy inspired others to attempt similar demolitions. But the establishment learned too, adapted, evolved, created new ways to silence troublesome women who refuse inherited shame. The cameras in that Paris tunnel stayed mysteriously dark. The white Fiat vanished like smoke. Henry Paul's blood sample.